Hey, it's Greg here with MaritimeGardening.com, and I thought I'd do a short video today talking about how I decide when to plant things. I've written an article on this on my Substack page, MaritimeGardening.substack.com, and I've done a whole podcast on this topic, breaking it down in fine detail. But I realized this morning I've never done a really short, tight video on the topic, and it's the question I get asked the most. I mean, I have a regular day job just like the rest of you, I assume. And people know I've got a big garden. I'm really into gardening, so they always ask me, when should I plant my squash? When should I plant my carrots? When should I plant my kale? When should I plant my beets? You know, I'll get those questions all the time. And I always tell them, just watch dandelions. It's the simplest indicator. So I think about a dandelion. It's this plant, it's a perennial that has a deep root and it's plugged into your lawn. And everybody's got dandelions, right? So when you think about the dandelions that are on your property, those are indicators of seasonal change. It's an indicator of how much sun there's been this season, exactly where you live. How much energy from the sun has been absorbed into the soil. I mean, nothing's going to happen with a dandelion until the soil hits a certain temperature, right? Once the soil gets warm enough, it starts sending up greens. Right? And once it's been at that temperature for long enough and getting warmer and warmer, all of a sudden it sends up flower buds. And then after, about a week of that, once it's, again, this all happens with sun. Once it's had enough sun and enough heat and the soil's getting warm and all that sort of stuff, then the flowers open. These aren't open right now. All my dandelions are yellow right now, or the vast majority of them are yellow. Right? But these aren't open because it's early in the morning, it's 6 a.m., right? But the flowers open up and you get these yellow flowers everywhere. That tells you that it's been a certain amount of warm for a certain amount of length of time, right? And then at some point, which is just starting to happen on my property, they turn white, right? And at some point, right, they turn white and then you can blow them off, right? Okay, now let's back up again. The dandelion measures how long you've had warm days on your property and how much heat has been sort of absorbed and collected by the ground, right? So it's a seasonal change indicator. Now, every kind of seed, I'm going to talk about sowing right now. I'll talk about transplants in a minute, but just talking about sticking seeds in the ground. Every type of seed has a temperature that it needs to germinate. It's called a minimum germination temperature. Also, every type of seed has an optimal germination temperature, which for a lot of plants is around room temperature of your house, right? 20 degrees Celsius or whatever that is in Fahrenheit, 67 Fahrenheit. But also every seed has a temperature where it'll die, right? Remember, all seeds are alive, right? Or, it's just waiting to grow, right? Waiting for the right conditions. But there's a temperature where the life in that seed just can't make it. Some seeds are incredibly tough. I've done experiments in my garden where I've planted parsnip seeds in the fall and just left them so they didn't germinate. I just stick them on the ground in November. And then, the following year in April, they start growing, right? So that's a seed. I don't know what the sort of death temperature is for a parsnip seed, but it must be pretty low. They're pretty tough, right? Because it can get to minus 20 degrees Celsius, minus 20 below freezing here where I live, right? And it can get colder in other parts of Canada. So every seed has a temperature where if it's cold, especially some seeds, they can get cold, but if they're wet and cold, they die. Okay, so every seed has a certain amount of temperature, a certain low temperature it can tolerate. If it goes below that, it dies. Every seed has a certain temperature it needs to germinate, and every seed has a certain temperature it needs to, really germinate well, right? Optimal. Okay, for me, the dandelion is a really good, simple indicator of that. There's all kinds of old rules of thumb of when to do different things. And dandelion is one of them. People say plant your potatoes when you see the dandelion flowers turn yellow, which you should do. It's a good indicator. But I just expanded on that because I don't want to have to look at tulips and forsythia and this thing and that thing and the other thing, right? It's just too much to watch for. So what I do is I watch my property and I wait until I look at the 3 different stages of the dandelion, right? Dandelion greens emerging, starting to grow up out of the ground. Dandelion flowers turning yellow. And dandelion flowers turning white. I call it dandelion green, dandelion yellow, dandelion white. Okay? And what I generally wait for is for an observation of a preponderance of that stage being everywhere. So I don't rush out and plant everything as soon as I see a dandelion green. When I see dandelion greens everywhere, that's when I plant the tough things. Lettuce, spinach, parsnips, things like that. Onion seeds. If you're going to plant onion seeds, you can plant them around then. Really, really tough things. I got a table. I'm going to put that up on the screen here or here. I don't know. I have to figure this out when I'm editing it. Probably over here because there's more space over here. Anyway, I'll put that up and you can see all these different plants. And I mean, it's not an exhaustive list. You'll have to just translate it to other varieties of things. But it's based on my experience, my understanding of the minimum germination temperatures of those things and how cold it can get, right? So a spinach seed, a lettuce seed, you can plant those as soon as you see the dandelion greens. During that time of the year, we certainly still get frosts, right? Because that's like early April, maybe even late March when that can happen. It really depends on what kind of year it is, right? Because seasons change from year to year. But those seeds can handle being frozen and thawed and frozen and thawed. Doesn't faze them at all, right? And when the seedlings emerge, you get tender little seedling. The seedling can handle being frozen and thawed and frosted and thawed and frozen and thawed, right? So it's okay to plant it early in the year. They're tough, they can take it. And I'll take you around the garden in a minute and show you all the things I've been growing since the start. I'll just do a little quick, because I've done some videos on this before, so I want to keep it short. Then once you see the dandelion preponderance, a lot, right? Sort of everywhere, right? Not just a couple, dandelion flowers. And think about your home or your property. You've got places, you're going to have places where the dandelions appear first because it's the warmest, sunniest spot. And you've got places where they appear last because it's shady and there's not a lot of sun and it takes everything longer to grow in those spots. Right? This forces you to sort of plug your mind into your property and really connect with nature, right? But when you see those things happening everywhere, the dandelion yellow, that's when you start planting things that can go out at that stage, like the beets and carrots and kale, everything in that cole crop family, broccoli, cabbage, all that sort of stuff, right? And a number of other things, right? Right? So Swiss chard, all sort of stuff. Those things will germinate. And there still will be some frosts when you see the dandelion yellow. But those things can handle the frost. I also plant potatoes. Now, potatoes can't handle frost. But if you put them in the ground when the dandelions turn yellow, cover that with about 6 inches of mulch, it's going to be weeks before they actually pop up out of the ground. So they can grow at that, the temperature the soil's at that stage of the growing season, the potato's putting out roots and putting out roots. And once it's put out, a certain amount of roots, it starts sending its eyes up through everything. Usually the timing works that if you plant your potatoes when you see the dandelions turn yellow, the actual leaves won't emerge from the ground until you're past your risk of frost, okay? So that's what you do when you see dandelion yellow. Then when you see dandelion whites everywhere, I mean everywhere. So I've got some on my lawn right now. I'd say maybe 10-15% of my dandelions have turned white right now. And I think it's May, I don't know what the date is. I can't remember. I think it's May 25th, maybe? I can't remember. It's around the end of May. And I notice when I take a walk around the street here, I got a sort of 3-kilometer loop of a street. Some houses have more white dandelions than means. It means it's warmer where they are. There's less of a risk of frost on their property as there is on mine. I've got a sort of cold spot here, right? I notice my tulips are behind everyone else's plants, right? Everything's behind here. I think there's a fly in the screen. Sorry about that. So when I see a good amount of, I've got transplants in my house, and I got things I want to plant. So all the heat-loving things like your squash and your cucumbers and your tomatoes and your eggplant and your peppers and all that sort of stuff, right? Really tender plants, can't take any frost at all, can't shrug it off, right? Frost kills the leaves. When I see a lot of white dandelions, the vast majority of the dandelions have turned white. That's the indication to me that it's time to plant out my transplants and put the seeds in the ground for the things I like to direct seed, like squash and cucumbers and that sort of thing, right? Now, for all of those guidelines I just indicated, and I mean these are guidelines, they're not rules, you can bend them. Right? If you put something out a bit ahead of schedule, you just need to put some sort of, like I've got over here. If you want to put a dandelion yellow thing out when it's dandelion green, put a plastic dome out. That one on the left there, I actually have tomato seeds in the ground underneath that dome. I mean, we just got frost a few days ago, right? I don't know, but I'm going to assume that the seeds are okay. They were planted about a week ago, right? So they should be germinating soon, and they should be sorry for the shaky camera work here. They should be up soon, but I don't think they're up yet. I'll have a look later on, okay? But if you want to plant something a little bit early, you can put a dome down, something like that. Or if you're worried that there's a risk of frost, it's always good to have a few of these things, something to cover your plants with. Right? So if you plant everything, because you see dandelions that have turned white everywhere, and you're worried it's going to be too cold for them, then use a dome like that. Or, it's kind of one of the things I'm going to be doing in my garden today, I'm preparing some spaces, because it's getting really close to when I can plant out my tender things. I'm preparing all the spaces where the tender things can go, and I've got some of these domes. I'm going to put them over those beds in advance of planting them to just get the soil temperature up a bit. So here's just a quick little walk around. I'll show you what's been planted. I'm not going to show you perennials, but things I've planted. So these are our onion sets that I planted. You can plant these at dandelion green. I think I planted them at dandelion yellow, maybe 2 weeks ago, and maybe earlier than that, I can't remember. But yeah, onion sets are tough. They can take the cold. Onion greens are tough. They can't take a hard freeze, but they can take a frost for sure. We've had multiple frosts since these were put in the ground, and you can see the greens are totally fine, right? So they're doing great. Over here I got beets, right? These have been exposed. These were planted at dandelion yellow. Multiple frost. They're doing fine. Another good thing of planting early like this is that you're still getting rain. You're still getting your spring rain, right? Over here, I don't know if you can see, but I got carrots just starting to come up, just barely coming up. And along the edge of the garden, even though the package says you can't plant them, this is cilantro, okay? Most seed packs for cilantro say, do not plant until all risk of frost is over. Not true. I planted these at dandelion yellow. These early seedlings have been exposed to multiple frosts. They're fine. Cilantro can take a little frost. Here I've got some peas. Okay, I planted these when I saw peas are sort of an in-between plant. They're really tough and they can handle the cold, but they do germinate better with a bit of warmth. So I bend the rules with the peas. I don't plant them at dandelion. I sort of plant them at the beginning of dandelion yellow, put it that way. Right? As soon as I see, let's say, a quarter of my lawn have yellow dandelions, I plant the peas, okay? So you can see these are fine. They've been exposed to multiple frosts, and they're going to be way ahead. I'm going to have peas first, then beans, right? That way we've got a nice succession of things happening in the garden, right? These peas are doing great. Here I've got a kind of like, Here I've got something like a bok choy or pak choy or something like that, right? That's doing fine. That was planted at dandelion yellow. Lettuce over here planted at dandelion green, doing fine. Early spinach planted at dandelion green, clearly doing great, right? Happy spinach. Here I got some parsnips that I planted right at the beginning of dandelion green, early dandelion green. Parsnips are invincible. And finally over here we got lots of different kinds of kale. These are my own saved seeds, that's why there's so many seeds. These are going to have to be thinned out, but yeah, I got lots of kale growing here, right? Different varieties of kale, and I've got a broccoli, I think. Anyway, they're all doing fine. Right here I've got leeks planted at dandelion green, right? They're coming up. Leeks take a long time, so you got to get them in the ground early. Here I've got some Brussels sprouts planted at dandelion yellow, right? These have been exposed to frost. They're doing fine. Also, when plants are really small, they seem to be a bit more frost tolerant than when they're big. You know, these early leaves are tougher than the later leaves, and that makes sense, right? So it's kind of, I don't know why it works that way, but it does. I find the early leaves, maybe they're closer to the ground, so they're closer to the heat that's stored there during the day, but they can ride out a frost better than a fully grown plant, sometimes. And here I got some Swiss chard. Now, I put these seeds in the ground at dandelion green, but I had them underneath one of my little plastic domes, the one that tomatoes are under. Let's go look at those tomatoes. So this garden is going to be a tomato garden. It's not ready yet. I got to get it ready for that. And they're going to be going in about a week, I think. But let's see if these have germinated yet. Okay, I think they have. I think that right there, I think that might be a tomato. Yes, I mean, it could be a weed. It's possible. I'll know when a few more leaves appear. So these were planted a week ago. You notice I put some, this is just like my wife has a few potted plants in the front. And every year I use her old potting soil when I lay down when I sow seeds, because it makes the soil a bit darker, right? And again, that dark soil absorbs heat, helps the seed germinate. So I mean, they could be weed seeds. But if that was the case, they'd be growing everywhere, and they seem to just be growing in that black line where I planted the seeds. Right, so I've got tomato transplants indoors, but some years I like to do some direct seeded like this, and some indoors. The ones indoors are like a foot high. And of course, these ones, some of them have germinated, and they're only an inch high. But I would wager that in 2 months, you won't be able to tell the difference. And these ones, and they're the same variety too. Amish paste tomato, lovely tomato. But in a couple months, I'd be interested to see if they're both the same size or one's smaller than the other. I find these direct seeded tomatoes, if you can get them in the ground early, like I did here, where I sort of bent the rules, where I sowed tomato seeds while we're still getting frost, but they're up. Anyway, I think I went over my 10-minute limit. I'm sorry. Maybe when I'm editing this, I can pare it down a little bit. But I think you get the point. A lot of people plant everything based on a date. I plant everything after this date. That'll always work if the date's so far into the season that there is zero risk of anything. But for so many plants, you can plant them earlier. So why are you waiting? Because they can handle the frost. And for any plant, like a tomato or a squash or something like that, if you can get it out there a little bit earlier, you're going to be able to harvest it that much earlier. I mean, maybe this matters more for people like me that live somewhere with a relatively short growing season, where we get frost right up to the end of May, and we start getting frost in September. So it's pretty tight, right? But we have a long spring and we have a long fall. So if you get anything that can take frost, put it in earlier, and then you'll get it that much, that sort of thing, right? You'll get it that much later. So for me, dates are crude and inaccurate, and they will fail you. Where I live, if you look at any calendar, just do it yourself. I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Go look it up. Look at our last frost date. It was weeks ago. And we've gotten frost every week since the last frost date. Last frost date. Not the last frost date. We're still getting frost, right? So it's inaccurate. Using a calendar, I don't know how they determine what it is, but it's not correct, right? So you've got a plant that's been around for, I don't know how long the dandelion's been around, but it's been around a long time, longer than people, I would imagine, right? And it survives by doing everything at the right time. So you've got this great soil thermometer that's better than a soil thermometer because it's everywhere. And it's out here all the time. And it's measuring the soil temperature in the morning, in the evening, and overnight, and it's responding to you. And you can observe the changes in that plant over the course of the growing season, and it'll tell you how much sun energy has been absorbed into the soil, and it's measuring seasonal change. It's telling you when it's the season to do this, when it's the season to plant your tough things, when it's the season to plant your sort of tough things, and when it's the time of year, the season to plant your tender things. So I hope you found that interesting. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Check out my podcast, maritimegardening.com. Check out my Substack page, maritimegardening.substack.com, where I write articles and I sort of walk you through all the finer details of this sort of thing. I write an article every week, put a lot of thought into it. You know, I can tell there's been more people subscribing, and I got a promotion right now. I've been running it for a while. Every time I get 100 paid subscribers, I'll give one of those people a $100 gift certificate at their favorite, you know, at the online seed store of their choice, online garden store of their choice. Okay, that's the deal. Paid subscribers. Doesn't matter if you're a full month paid or just or full year paid or just a monthly subscriber. I don't care. I just want subscribers. Right? Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you found this dandelion planting schedule concept useful. I've been using it for years and it works. Okay, it's not 100% accurate, but it works most of the time, which is, for gardening, that's about as best you can hope for. All right, so we'll see you next time, and happy gardening.